Welcome everyone to a special episode of Get Resource Smart. I am your host, Flo Nicholas. The reason why this episode is special is because there's an epidemic going on right now, and it's loneliness. And we're seeing an increase in people who really, really need community support, mental health support. And we're going to cover all that basics with my guest today. Welcome, Jennice Chewlin. You're actually the founder of Chewlin Group. So before we really dig deep into what's going on, as we're seeing, really, I feel like it's like a global epidemic that's going on. We're going to talk a little bit about you and how you're going to really help us understand more about health and well-being, mental well-being, and all the steps that we need to take to really put ourselves first.
I love that. Well, thank you, Flo. Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Jennice Chewlin, and I'm the founder of Chewlin Group. We are a workplace well-being consultancy that helps organizations who give a damn about the health and well-being of their workforce. So right away, I can share with you that organizations who come to us are looking to help their employees have resources and tools that they can use to better manage stress, prevent burnout, and amplify a sustainable work-life balance. So a lot of our work is designing workshops, both virtually and in person, that provides these skill-building tools for teams to try on together, talk about, and discuss, to think about some of the myths that surround mental well-being and what's working, what's not working, sharing and exchanging these tools.
Yeah.
So what I love about my job is that I get to witness a team laugh together, nod in agreement, or have these aha moments when they realize that we're debunking a myth. It's so transformative to see that, and so I feel so special to be a part of that process.
And that's fantastic, and I think now more than ever, we're starting to see an increase in people talking about mental health well-being, right? Like I matter, right? And that I shouldn't just be at work, putting in 40, 80, 100 hours and not taking care of me. And one of the things, and I did a show about this a while ago, where we talked about the Great Resignation. Then there was quiet quitting. Then there was quick quitting. Then now I'm hearing this new phrase, grumpy at work. Like people are just to the point where they're fed up, that they're just like, you know what? Okay, fine. I'm not gonna quit my job. I'm gonna stay, but I'm not gonna be happy. But is that really a solution?
Right. I think you're highlighting the point that more than ever, employees are voicing that we are humans when we come to work. We are whole persons, and if anything, COVID taught us about the workplace that employee well-being and engagement matters.
Right.
Like you're saying. And especially the Gen Z and millennial population, as that workforce is growing, they are stating, hey, mental well-being matters to me, so what is your organization doing to support me and my work-life balance? Because we see that if not, it leads to some of these things that you're talking about, which wreaks havoc on the company, financially and engagement-wise.
I mean, you're making a fantastic point, because I feel like right now, in terms when you look at the future of work, right? People are looking at those things. Do I have flexibility? Is it remote work? Do I have hybrid? Do you care about the fact that, hey, I'm pregnant and I have doctor's appointments? Or, hey, I have, children and I have to do school drop-off, pickups and all that, right? People are now really looking and assessing an organization at how they value them as a person, right? And we're seeing the data. The data shows this, that people are looking at organizations and checking to see, are they inclusive? And then are they gonna make my mental health and well-being a priority? More than ever, this seems like very critical conversation to have, because I'm also seeing that the data is showing an increase with people with depression, and some of it is also caused by being unsatisfied at work.
Like doing unfulfilling work per se.
Yeah.
And you talked a lot of different points. One, I want to highlight how there is a growing move towards remote work.
Right.
Right? And so we have to think about how are these employees connecting in a way that makes them feel like they're seen, heard, and valued.
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing to know about remote work is that you obviously lose on that organic chatter that you might get in a hallway or passing by someone's cubicle.
Right. What would you do this weekend?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And or how was that event you did?
Right.
So it's really incumbent on companies to think about being proactive in setting up ways that they can have their team members engage. And while it might seem a little contrived at first, it's if you offer it consistently, you'll start to see that it's this natural container that you're offering employees to connect.
Okay.
Lunch, you know, I know one company that is doing virtual lunches bi-weekly.
Oh,
they don't
nice.
talk about work, but they engage in lunch together virtually.
Right.
You know, you're thinking about things like this.
That. But I will tell you this, as long as your mic is off, okay? Because there's something about somebody chewing.
Oh, okay,
in my
good
ear.
point. There's etiquette. Let's talk about that. There's etiquette.
Right.
And talking about that, not everyone's going to be ready to share lunch number one.
Right.
That's why it has to be ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah.
You know?
What else? I mean, this is really good. What other engaging and connecting activities, I guess, besides the luncheon, what is the other top activity that you think organizations can do?
Okay, another strategy that you can do to increase engagement and connection beyond work tasks is to start meetings in a fun and light way, connecting, you know, what did everyone go around and share what they did this weekend?
Right.
Some people, if they're virtually, will do it through photos. They'll get to share their screen and post a picture of a beautiful hike they did or pictures of their kids because that's what they did over the weekend.
Right.
And again, what that does is lets people show up as whole humans. And someone else might get inspired and say, oh, you know what? I know there's a hike near your house, maybe, or near my house, maybe I'll go next weekend. And so that cross and that knowledge sharing helps them with thinking of other things that they can do to take care of themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because one of the terms that I keep seeing now in social media is human-centric, right? Is how organizations can be human-centric.
Yeah, and you touched on this already, saying that they're looking for flexibility. Workers are looking for flexibility, predictability, and connection.
Yeah.
Those three things. And so thinking about strategies that organizations can implement in small ways and big ways. I think a lot of times we keep seeing articles that pop up and HR managers or leaders are like, oh my gosh, how are we doing? How am I going to implement this?
Yeah.
Take it slow. Talk to your team. Do they feel disconnected? Because if they don't, then what you're doing is good.
Yeah.
But if they are, then it's time to get the help of someone who has resources. And the U.S. Surgeon General put two wonderful pieces of frameworks that talks about workplace mental well-being and has a long list of resources of other companies that have done it. So case studies, so that you can kind of get an idea of what's working out there and what are some ways you can implement it for your own organization.
No, that definitely makes sense. And the other thing I'm thinking about as you were talking is there was this kind of certain taboo before, right? Is the you suck it up.
Yes.
Right? Whatever you're going through emotionally, it's like you gotta, bring your best when you show up to work. You gotta be the best of the best, right? And no matter what you're going through, you just gotta suck it up. And I grew up in a household, where that was essentially, hey, you just gotta have thick skin and you gotta be strong. It's not until now that I'm an adult where it's like, no, it's okay to be in touch with your feelings. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I still feel there's some people who fear maybe repercussions or retaliation if they just open their mouth and say, hey, I'm not happy, or I'm not feeling myself at this job. I'm not getting fulfillment, because sometimes what they might hear is, well, just be happy you have a paycheck.
I mean, there's so much to unpack
Yeah.
there. One is you're on the broad spectrum, you're talking about mental health. And there is a stigma that mental health means, when someone hears mental health, they think of mental illness or a condition. When in reality, mental health is how you think, how you feel, and how you act. And if you think about it, every person you know thinks, feels, and acts, including yourself. So everyone has mental health. But what happens is we have these conditions that society or families, or even these adages, I grew up hearing, you'll sleep when you're dead. You know,
Right.
go, go, go.
Right.
And so you hear this, and what happens is you internalize that.
Yeah.
And there aren't opportunities to talk about that.
Yeah.
And so what I love, what we do is we give these spaces for teams to talk about these
Right.
adages, or, you know what, I do believe in that myth. And oops, I didn't know that that's what it
Right.
meant. Because if not, what happens is that that stigma and the myths just perpetuate and go on, and we end up with people who feel like, is something wrong with me because I'm unhappy? Or is something wrong with me because this workload feels like it's too much?
Yeah.
And there's the fear that you're talking about, saying to your leader or manager, hey, this is too much for me. I've got a lot going on personally. For the season of life that I'm in, I need to make some changes.
Right.
So there's that communication, but there's fear,
Right.
That we might get retaliation, or someone might not think we are giving it our all, right? As two successful business owners, I'm sure that I feel that a lot of people, because I talk about stress management and preventing burnout, people might think that I don't experience it.
Right.
When the truth is, I do.
Yeah, I experience it every day sometimes, okay? So-
Exactly. We need to normalize
Yeah.
that conversation. There are times where I struggle. In fact, in 2019, I burned out. I joined the workforce as a full-time remote worker after my motherhood duties. And I was like, it's time for me to go back. I'm
Right.
going to do this. And whoa, it was really hard. And talk about this stigma. Other women around me weren't telling me, hey, this is going to be hard for you.
Right.
This transition might kick your butt. And I just kept going and suffered, struggled. I felt too proud to let people know
Right.
that I needed some help, or I felt like my work might think I'm not good enough. She's not ready to enter the workforce, because I was struggling with the workload. So I share that experience to let people know that it's normal
Right.
to struggle, but the important thing is to reach out and let people know
Right.
you need help. And
Yeah.
that's what I did. And little by little, I gained more tools and really created a nice group of support,
Yeah.
a network of support, which was crucial for me to get over the hump.
Yeah, you need that support. And as you're telling this story, I recently was a speaker for a woman of color, like entrepreneur summit. It was a virtual summit. And when I started seeing some other women business owners just talk about the struggles they were going through, how they felt like they were alone, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not alone, right? Because in those moments, you feel like they possibly couldn't be another person who feels the way you do. But in that moment, when I heard them telling their stories, it was so similar to my story. And because they were, open about their struggles, even though they were struggling, I was happy to hear about their struggles because I had the same struggles. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, you're not the only one going through this. And continue to tell your story, and more than anything, get support.
Yes.
Find a support system, which, I'm thankful as well that I have a great support of other women. Some are entrepreneurs, some are C-suite executives, and we're able to kind of share our struggles, our frustrations, our successes, our happiness. And that connection has been so vital for me, because when I'm having a bad day, I'm not gonna say, oh, Flo, just suck it up. Now when I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna, who am I texting to talk to help me navigate through this bad day? And I think most importantly is allow yourself to have a bad day, right? We can't be all smiles every day. If you gotta cry, cry, right? If you gotta eat that ice cream to make yourself feel better, listen, get 2 gallons of that ice cream, okay? We gotta embrace what we're feeling and not ignore it. And I can tell you that is something I have learned now, being somebody who's in their 40s. And I'm upset that it's taken me this long to realize that it's okay to not be okay, right?
Yes.
It's okay to be stressed out, right? It's okay to be a mother and feeling like, I feel like I'm sucking at parenthood, right? It's okay to have all those emotions.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I started Chewlin Group, because when I started talking about it, then others opened up.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly your experience. When you start talking about your experiences, others feel safe and others feel like, me too.
Right.
And so once I realized that, I was like, wait a minute. I also realized that my work, they didn't know how to give a damn about my health and well-being.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't feel comfortable and safe to tell them that I'm struggling. And there's reasons behind that. And so if you dig deeper, they just didn't have the resources to help me. And if I'm one of several in their team, there were others as well.
Right.
So I started just doing more research, and I'm really looking at my experience and knowing that others are feeling the same way. I said, okay, I'm just going to create what I need, what I needed back then. And so therefore there's Chewlin Group. We focus on mental well-being because it's affecting everyone.
Right.
In rural, in urban settings, across industries, everyone has mental well-being at work top of mind. So what I did is I designed an innovative approach to workplace mental well-being by leveraging public health principles and positive psychology models to create spaces where people can talk and share, and then most importantly is have this knowledge transfer, right? And we're not talking at our audience, we're creating this space and giving really meaningful prompts for people to chatter about important topics.
Yeah, and there's a word that you use that is so critical, safe. And we're also seeing the terminology, psychological safety at work. And a lot of organizations don't realize how important that is. So let's talk about what you're seeing, our organizations kind of acknowledging, the fact that, hey, besides, better pay, that there is this other humongous factor that is so important, which is the mental health well-being, which could really, is also correlated to, our physical mental well-being as well. Are you seeing, are organizations being receptive to saying, hey, we've got to make this a priority? Like, this is a crisis.
Absolutely. The organizations, and not all of them, right? I mean, we know that, but the organizations who are contacting Chewlin Group are already acknowledged that mental well-being is a priority for us.
Right.
And hey, by the way, our staff is struggling. It's been a hard year back from COVID.
Yeah.
I do workshops with educators, nonprofits, businesses, and just hearing from them saying it's not been so easy for us to return back to normal.
Yeah.
And so there is this movement to acknowledge, and even this conversation is going to build awareness that mental well-being at work is important, is a top priority for many people. And if we don't work together and go all in together to advance mental well-being in the workplace, we're going to see some really devastating consequences.
Right. And the consequences are some of them are, traumatic. Some of them are death. I remember there was a Miss America that committed suicide. I remember she was a lawyer, And by all accounts, when you looked at her, it was like, oh my gosh, she's living the best life ever.
Sure.
And when I heard, that she took her life, I was like, oh my goodness, why? And even if you remember, oh my God, what was his name? Ellen's
He was on Ellen's show. And
I can't, it's like at the top of my tongue, I can't even think of it, but he looks so happy. Stitch, is that what it is? Right?
Stitch.
He looks so happy. He's on the Ellen show. He's dancing. I'm like, I want his job.
Yeah.
He had a beautiful family. And then again, to hear that, he took his life. So those are the things that we really got to pay attention to. Is that this is serious. This isn't just oh, you're not happy, go grab a candy bar and some chocolate, you'll be fine tomorrow.
Yes, this is not workplace mental well-being isn't this feels good, or we have enough room in the budget, let's do it. This is really prioritized and proactive movement and strategy, leaning on resources in your community who can help you access really good care, access engagement opportunities. Because you mentioned besides, equal pay and fair pay, we should name that, right? Like that is also one way to help advance mental well-being in the workplace.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, those two people that people on the outside might look at and say, wow, they have a really good life.
Yeah.
His life was supposed to be all on social media, but we just don't know, right? That's what the lesson is. You don't know what people are struggling with, are suffering with.
Right.
And so it's important that everyone knows resources to help someone who might be in need. And so knowing what those are and being at work, where do we spend most of our time? At work.
Working.
So how can the workplace help us advance mental health well-being? And that's why curiosity is so important. It's a huge piece of it. Some people want to turn away and just keep, looking at the margins and the profitability. And some recognize the importance and their responsibility in advancing.
Right, and more than ever, like I said, the future of work is changing, and people, certain things they're prioritizing, like, hey, I don't need to make $200,000 because I can make $200,000, but I could be miserable at work, which when you're miserable at work, at times that falls into your personal life, how your relationships with your spouses, with your children, with your family and friends. And that's why this needs to be a priority. And I think the other thing that we really do need is when we look at our health insurance, right, and we look when people want to get mental health professional. Sometimes, it's like, hey, you got to meet your deductible. You got to spend, $20,000 and then we'll pay. And I think that organizations, when they're negotiating with healthcare providers, I think they really need to now, moving forward, be that element of when you get your annual health check, right, that is covered 100%. There needs to be something there that's similar, like mental health check. Maybe you need 2 or 3 visits, and then after that, how else can we provide resources for you to get help when you need help?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point about benefits, and the workplace can negotiate with insurance companies and they can advocate on behalf of their employees. But if you don't know what you're advocating for, then you don't know, right? And so looking at your employees and having them share with you what matters to them, what benefits are they using? What benefits are hard to access? Because it's one step to offer it, but then it's the second step to see who's using it and who's not using it and why. Exactly. Are there barriers like transportation, finances? It's really getting to know your employees beyond their skill sets and work tasks.
Yeah. I mean, again, besides, correlating how somebody might be feeling towards maybe they make a tougher decision where it's like, hey, I can't handle this, and they choose suicide. I think the biggest thing that really companies need to be looking at that's also impactful, just as impactful, is the productivity, right? And just the creativity and being innovative, right? When I'm not me at work, I'm not showing up and being productive and being innovative and being creative at all. You know, I'm miserable. I'm gonna be Debbie Downer in that office. And one of the things that you brought up that I just wanna circle back to is, and we've seen these headlines, you know, COVID, the world shut down, people became remote, and then now it's like, nope, we want you in the office, you better show up. But what I'm seeing is people saying, oh yeah? Watch me walk out because I'm not showing up. I don't know if companies that are doing these mandates are really making the right decision.
And we won't know. We won't know for a little bit more time when they start looking at their bottom line, when they start saying, where are our workers?
Right.
What's going on? Listening to your team. What do they want? What do they need right now? And it's flexibility. You know, we just keep talking about that. It really does go back to it. We both probably know someone that was willing to walk away from their job because they need remote, right? Yeah. But then you have the remote workers like me, who was like, yeah, I love remote, but I still need a way to be seen and heard in my company.
Yeah.
You know, what can we do besides traditional meetings that we have to get through things? Like, we have to get stuff done.
Right.
But how do you see me? How can I tell you that I'm a mother? Because I didn't share with my company that I was a mother for several months because I was working against this idea that I couldn't be both. Right? I could only be a successful woman in the workforce, but I have to keep it quiet that I'm a mom. So the business that I have now is more of an exclamation of me and like what I needed in my life back then.
See me world and what I can do, right?
Exactly. And then what attracts people to my approach to mental well-being in the workplace is this. Is this knowledge and this like, listen, whatever we were doing 10 years ago is just not going to work. So we're going to do it this way. And what do you know? People want that. They want that newness, that fresh approach that is just different, but still provides evidence-based tools.
Right. So besides the activities that you kind of highlighted earlier, luncheon, which I said I don't want to hear somebody chewing in my ear. And sharing, hey, this is what I did this weekend. How can managers really ensure, especially those that still have employees that are remote, that their employees are being essentially being seen and heard and recognized if they're doing great work? And also, how can managers be empowered to be intentional about making sure they're also not focusing just on that performance management piece of like, oh, did you close this deal? Did you close X amount of sales? But also focusing on how are you today?
I'm going to start my response by indicating that there's research that shows employees look at their managers to model the behavior that they should be doing. Research came out that more so than spouses or friends, employees were looking at their managers to see how they were going to talk about mental health in the workplace. And what that shows is it's important for managers to model what they want to see in their employees. So getting comfortable with talking about your life outside of work, right? Or also talking about struggles that you have. Humanizing, right? That everyone goes through these experiences of loneliness, of heartache, grief. The more we can talk about that, the more we can say, I'm not alone. And if you don't feel like you're alone, then you can reach out. That's when you can reach out to someone. You can lean on someone to get you through these hard moments. So the message to managers is to just think out of the box. Go beyond these we hear a lot about having these like one-on-ones with each employee. But if you're managing 80 people, that can get really tough. So thinking outside of the box on how you can create engagement with everybody and where you can talk about things that you yourself are going through, I think that for me what impacted me, not having my manager tell me what was, they were struggling with, made me feel like I couldn't show up and tell them, hey, it's hard to balance this motherhood and work, full-time work.
Right. It's that resonating with your employees, right?
Yes.
And so there are a couple of CEOs that have gotten in trouble with like layoffs and just in the manner of how they did it. Some people weren't even, well, essentially people found out like, oh, I don't have a job when they try to log in and their login is not working. How can the executive teams be part of the solution and not part of the problem?
Yes, because we hear this, it's got to be a top-down approach to organizational change.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, and also think that it's top-down and buy-in from employees too.
Yeah.
The whole organization has to say, hey, we just wanted to let you know that we care about your mental well-being, and this is how we care. Right? It's written in their employee handbook on how they're approaching mental well-being, what their email policy is, right? Are the expectations that you're supposed to be online 24/7?
Right.
It's all about communication, but having executives buy in, but then also show that buy-in through policies, through their own vulnerability, and then having them support managers who want to try something new.
Yeah.
So we do coaching as well. And what we do is we coach to foster mental well-being champions at the workplace.
I love that.
Because again, like we have these tips, but how do you integrate that into real workplace? So we coach managers and make these small changes that they feel they can handle to be cheerleaders, right? Mental well-being champions at the workplace, so they have somewhere to go to if they need a resource, and employees have access to a manager that sees them for more than just the work task.
Right, and I think when you started talking about managers as well, I think from the C-suite, they also need to be empowering managers and making any resources available for managers, right, to be able to then essentially ensure that their teams are getting those resources that they need for mental well-being.
Yes, and so you think about your audience. Well, who's the decision maker? And if it is the executives who they say they care, right? Like I do care about my mental well-being. How do I approach them? As well, what do they oftentimes care about too? The ROI, the return on investment.
Yeah.
And so that's when we can get into showing up and saying like, I feel like being productive today. I can be productive because I had some time off to really relax. And I'm gonna be creative because I haven't spent 18 hours on my computer. So looking and sharing that information with leadership and executives, they can really have that buy-in that this is a long-term effort.
It is.
This is not one and done.
Yeah.
This is a true change, organizational change.
Right. And I remember, I don't know what CEO, what company this is, but I remember seeing something where they essentially said, listen, we're going to do a cleanse of your calendars, right? Because sometimes you just have, and I remember this in corporate, there were some meetings I'll be sitting there like, why am I even in this meeting? This has nothing to do with like what I'm working on, my department, But I'm seeing this kind of shift by some companies to just say, hey, let's be more intentional about the meetings that we're putting on our calendar. Is this critical? Can you just send me an email? And I love the fact of I'm seeing some companies who are getting it. Help your employees be productive. Help your employees want to show up to work by creating that culture where, hey, we prioritize you, your well-being, and there are some companies now that are just like, hey, you need a you day off, no questions, just take it. I think we need to start seeing that being ingrained into the culture of some of these companies.
Yes, I mean, you talked about the culture, right? The culture of well-being. You probably have seen a couple companies here in New Hampshire who say, hey, we're closed off for a week. We're giving our employees a week, right?
Yes.
And it makes you change your mind, like, ooh, there's companies that are doing that?
Yeah.
What does that do for the employees? And then it's a beautiful story. Employees write blog posts on what they did during their time off and how they are recharged and refreshed.
Right.
New perspective, ready to hit the ground running. So I love to hear stories like that because it makes you feel like, oh, some things are changing, you know? And you also have to look at short-term and long-term solutions to mental well-being at workplace. We just said, you know, it's not one and done. And we also have to look at frequency because not everyone is going to be ready for a workshop and to engage with their team, especially if they feel like they haven't been seen and valued for a long time. It's going to take some time and momentum. So organizations need to keep that in mind when they are thinking about mental well-being in the workplace and any type of organizational change that they want to make. What are the entry points that they're providing their teams to enter into this conversation?
Right.
It's not just one time, this one big summit or this lunch and learn.
Right.
It's maybe working with me one-on-one and like getting enthusiastic and then bringing that enthusiasm back
into the workplace. Yeah, because there's no need to be grumpy while at work. It's unacceptable. And I think for companies strategically, I think this is a business case justification. Right. If you want your employees to show up and be their best, then, you know, you also too as an organization have to show up and be your best, right? Treat your employees like, you know, they matter. And one aspect of that is really creating, again, that culture of where, hey, your well-being is critical to us. So for someone who's watching as we wrap up, you know, we talked about in the beginning how it can be difficult for some people to speak up because for some they're like, oh my God, I got bills to pay. This is my job. If I speak up, I'm going to lose my job. What is your message to that person right now watching who's like, oh my God, that's me. You're talking to me. I am not happy. I am grumpy while at work, but I don't want to be like this. You know, what is the one thing they can do right now to shift?
That's a great question. I want to tell someone who feels like this story is resonating with them is you are not alone. You're feeling like you're struggling and you're unhappy at work. You're not alone. Life is hard. Seasons of our life is hard. Working somewhere where we don't feel like we are seen or heard is hard. And so the one suggestion I have is to go within. Because the only thing we have control of is ourselves. If you go within and seek what it is that you want. Are you unhappy at work because you don't like the responsibilities? Is it something that you could change at your work? The idea here is get curious with yourself.
Yeah.
What is it about work that you don't like? If it's the work task, can we make changes? If it's that the managers or your team, you don't feel like you belong, can you tell someone about that could be your advocate to help you make some of these engagement ideas come to fruition at work? Or if you're like, no, 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 then is it time to leave?
Yeah.
Is it time to leave? And I say that very lightly because, like Flo said, you got bills to pay, you have responsibilities, but you also deserve to have a life full of meaning, and you deserve to feel like you're respected and seen at work and be in a place that respects your mental well-being. That's not to say we're not going to have hard days.
Yeah.
You've said that already. It's really about working with what's there, getting curious, and being okay that you're not alone. Other people are as well.
You have to ask yourself those tough questions. You have to ask yourself, if I'm not happy, what is going to make me happy, right? And what actions do I as a person have control over that I can make to make that change to lead to happiness, right? I fully don't believe that anybody deserves to be sad and miserable. I really don't. It takes sometimes that courage to ask the questions and be willing to take the action. And again, like you said, if it means that, you know what, I gave it my all here, it's time for a change, then it's time for that change, you know?
Yeah, and if I could share a story, I mean, because what you just said reminded me that I was at a workplace where I felt miserable. I didn't feel like anyone really saw me, got to know me. And finally, because I was showing up and I was getting a little resentful and my work was starting to suffer and my engagement with my team members was suffering, finally, the universe gave me a promotion I wouldn't give myself, which is I wasn't happy there, but I just kept thinking, I can't quit. I'll be a failure. Others will think that I can't do it all, etc. I mean, all of these myths that I had. But then one day it just came to a point of fruition where the company and I decided to go separate ways. It just wasn't working out. So do you want to wait for action to be done to you, or do you want to leave and make some changes? So all of this is with a grain of salt, right? Everyone's personal situation is different. So this is not a blanket response for every person in their situation. I think that's important to clarify. And just knowing that it's okay to feel sad and it's okay to have hard days at work, but if things are persistent, then that's an alarm we need to watch out for.
Right, you've got to put yourself first. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really excited about all the work that you're doing because it's really critical. As I mentioned, that's the future of work, right? People are making these decisions to say, when I'm looking for a company, they need to check off this box, and mental health well-being is one of those boxes. And companies need to recognize that to be competitive in this job market, especially when you're really being competitive with highly qualified job candidates. Remember, when you're hiring candidates, a candidate is also hiring you as an organization, right? It's a two-way street, So if you're showing up as an organization that's like, oh, we're all about being tough and working hard, then that might be a red flag for someone who's like, hey, I'll come and work hard, but I also value and put myself as a priority, and I want to make sure you as an organization do that as well. So I think this was great. Listen, you're welcome back anytime. I know we keep seeing all these various movements, like, we went from, great resignation, quiet quitting, quick quitting, where you're just like, yep, bye, I'm not even going to give you a 2-week notice, to grumpy at work, which I think we both agree that we want to see that movement disappear quickly, because that should be unacceptable. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Flo. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great conversation. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
And to everybody else, thank you so much for watching this very special episode of Get Resource Smart, and stay tuned for more.